Are you a landlord and are wondering how a rent freeze could actually make the housing crisis worse? Well, realestate.com recently published an article on exactly this. This article was written by Ben Dorrington and was first published on the 15th of August 2023. As the rental crisis bites, there are growing calls to strengthen tenants' rights through rent freezes and caps. However, experts warn these measures are likely to make the problem worse. Renters continue to face rising rents and limited alternative homes to move into amid Australia's rental housing emergency. The Greens and other groups are calling on government to introduce a 2-year national rent freeze, followed by ongoing caps limiting rent increases to 2% every 2 years, among other measures to help renters. However, Grattan Institute Economic Policy Program Director Brendan Coates believes that the Greens' proposed rent freezes and caps could do more harm than good. He said rent freezes benefit existing renters in the short term, but could increase rates of homelessness for people in less secure accommodation. In a scarce housing market like today's rental market, a rent freeze could drive lower turnover and less availability of new rental income, of new rental accommodation. The reason why rents are rising is because housing is scarce, Mr. Coates said. Vacancy rates are at historic lows, and so if you freeze rents, you actually worsen the rental crisis for anyone looking for a home. In the short term, we need to find a way to get people to economise the amount of housing they occupy. Otherwise, the alternative is increased rates of homelessness because people can't find homes. Mr. Coates said an alternative solution would be to increase rent assistance in the short term and increase the housing supply over the long term. PopTrack economist Angus Moore said rent freezes have other side effects. He said evidence from San Francisco in the US showed that rent freezes incentivise landlords to remove properties from the rental market by redeveloping them for owner-occupiers. Landlords also redevelop properties into new buildings, since new buildings were exempt from rent controls in that case. Mr. Moore said we may end up with fewer rental properties and less rental availability over the long term, making it worse for renters. There is also evidence from Massachusetts suggesting that rent caps and freezes leads to underinvestment in rental properties from landlords because of the returns are capped, he said. So landlords respond by reducing investment in minor maintenance like painting and new carpets, which leads to an overall lower standard of rental stock that would otherwise be the case. Real Estate Institute of Australia President Hayden Groves said the continued politicking around rental affordability is causing further confusion for Australians and adversely impacting housing supply. At a time when cost of living, inflation and interest rates are challenging for all, family investors are rightly frightened by talk of rent controls and rent freezes. And we see that bearing out in the listings and the sales data, said Mr. Groves. The biggest loser out of that is, of course, as fewer rental properties will be available. What do the rental reform advocates want? Last month, a coalition of more than 80 housing services and community groups across Australia called on federal, state and territory governments to establish minimum standards for renting laws nationwide. The group, led by National Association of Renters organisation, NARO, is calling for fair limits on rent increases, ending no-cause evictions and other rental measures. There has never been a better opportunity for the country to work together to bring greater stability, safety and security to the millions of renting households nationwide, said National Association of Renters organisation, NARO, convener Penny Carr. This will lead to better health, education, employment outcomes for renters, as well as benefits to our whole community. It comes as the Greens continue to push the federal government to offer funding to the states and territories for similar rental measures, including its 2-year freeze on rent increases. Other measures include limiting that amount and the frequency of future increases and an end to no grounds evictions. The party wants to attach any rent control to the property rather than the lease to ensure that there is no incentive for a landlord to evict a tenant, as well as giving renters a right to request European-style long-term leases. Every person evicted out of their rental because they can't afford the rent increase is another person that may join the growing queues for public housing. So unless we cap rents, tackling the housing crisis will be almost impossible, says Max Chandler-Mather, Greens spokesperson for housing and homelessness. The Greens have said that they will pass Housing Australia Future Fund HAF bill in October if the federal government coordinates these reforms at National Cabinet and commits to investing $2.5 billion into public housing. Rent rules in Australia. So currently landlords can increase rents every 6 months in Western Australia and Northern Territory, while other states, including New South Wales, allow landlords to raise rents every 12 months. The state and territories do not directly regulate the amount of rent that the landlord can change when letting a property. Top 3 challenges for landlords right now. So, however, tenants in Victoria can make complaints about excessive rent increases to Consumer Affairs Victoria and try to appeal them at tribunal. In the ACT, there is a guideline that means landlords must apply to a tribunal to prove that their rental increase is not excessive. And if it passes a certain threshold, the threshold is more than 110% of the percentage increase in the ACT Consumer Price Index for rents during the period. The guideline puts the onus on the landlord to explain above guideline increases. If you are a landlord and you want to navigate this future with a professional real estate agency with a focus on property management, please come and talk to us. We will be able to help you. Our property managers have been with us for a very long time, in excess of 10 years, some of them 15 years, and we would love to be able to help you. If you're a landlord here in Sydney and are considering changing property managers, come and talk to us. We have an incredible team of professional property managers, and if you don't have 100% certainty in your property managers, come and talk to us. We believe that we've got an incredible service that can take care of you and your property and your tenants.